Assalamu alaikum. I'm Tamara Gray, and I'm really excited to be here today talking to you about the women around Nabi Musa, the prophet and messenger Moses. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Salatu salam ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala ali ashabi ajma'in. Today, this is a topic that is really interesting to me, and I hope really interesting to you, because I think we can stand back. We can take some steps back and think about what are we being called on to learn just by thinking about the women around Moses, alayhi salam, but then also their individual stories. So let's start with that big picture. Prophet Moses, alayhi salam, we do not know about his father. The Qur'an doesn't speak about his father. The Qur'an speaks about his mother and tells us a lot about her. We're going to do individual stories in a minute. This is a bird's eye view. It talks about his caretaker, Asya, the woman who will care for him. And we learn a lot about her too, and we learn about her status. It tells us something about his sister. It tells us something about his wife, who will become his wife and sister-in-law. All different women around this prophet, alayhi salam. Each of them with a different lesson for us to learn about life, really. It's important when we are looking at the stories of the prophets that we really look at them and we get curious about what we are meant to learn. Our prophet, Allahumma salli wa sallam barik alayhi, Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, has brought us the final message. Within that message are some of the messages of the earlier prophets. And we recognize the truth of the earlier prophets, and we recognize the necessity of that we have things we need to learn from them. And the Qur'an, one thing I often like to say is that the Qur'an it's a short book. I mean, if you think about it, it's actually not very long. And everything in that book is important. Every story, every person mentioned is important for us to learn something from. And I am a woman speaking about women around Musa, but don't make the mistake of thinking that these women are only there for the women of times to come. Just like I would hope you wouldn't make the mistake of thinking that someone like Nabi Musa is there only for the men of times to come. He is an example for all of us, just as these women are an example for all of us. I want to start where he started, with his mother, Musa. We learn this is what we call what she is called in the Quran, Musa. Now, let's contextualize this story and with what we already know, which is that it was a time of great oppression. Great oppression. When baby boys of Bani Israel were being slaughtered by Pharaoh, by the Pharaoh. It's a frightening thing. And she is pregnant and she has this baby. Now, that's scary. But then we learn something very interesting, which is that وَأَوْحَيْنَا, she is inspired. Awhayna. This comes from the word wahi. So there's a true divine inspiration here. إِلَى أُمِّ مُوسَى أَنْ أَرْضِعِيهِ فَإِذَا خِفْتِ عَلَيْهِ فَأَلْقِيهِ فِي الْيَمِّ. So she is called upon, awhayna. She's called upon, nurse your baby, and when you fear for him, put him in a container, a little thing in the river. وَلَا تَخَافِي, and don't be afraid. Let's unpack this for a minute. What does this say about who she is? First of all, we learn that she can differentiate direction from God, from direction from people, and her own internal compass. She is able to know that an angel has directed her of what to do with this son of hers, and that her son is going to be of the Mursaleen, or the prophet, is going to be a messenger. Now, that's really something to think about. One of the things I notice in life today is that so many of us, we're struggling, we're walking on the path, and we very often, Allah gives us gifts, real gifts, spiritual joys, spiritual joy dots, if you will. And what happens? We forget, or we don't pay attention to them. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grants us a blessing or a lesson or a message, and we're like, nah, that's not for me. So when we look at Musa and we see her as a woman in a scary time, able to understand, and not only understand, take it on. She reminds me of Miriam, taking on a great task. It's a great task. If you're a parent or an aunt, you're just a human being. It's not, can you imagine taking a baby and putting the baby in the basket? And why should she nurse him first? So he doesn't cry. Hello? A baby who is freshly nursed is generally a baby who will be calm and not cry and be fed. I mean, in being fed for a while, that child is going to be calmer. It's a whole plan. It's a whole setup that she doesn't have the whole picture of. That's another very important piece here. She's not given the whole picture. She's given her picture. Nurse him. When you feel there's danger, place him in the river and don't be afraid. Think about our lives, how much we don't know the whole picture, and how we obsess over something that happens to us because it's so big. We think it's so big and we don't know how to solve it. But what do we really need? We need to know we don't know the whole picture. Let's do what is right. Do what we know we should do and leave the rest to Allah. And this is what she does. She's human. And so after the child has gone away, it's been away for a while, أصبحت فؤاد أم موسى فارغا. أصبحت. The heart, the fu'ad of the mother of Moses becomes empty. I'm really fascinated by this because we live in a time where emotion has been demonized. Maybe not demonized, that's maybe an extreme word, where emotion has been, we have been led to believe that emotion is weakness, that emotion is something that is not necessarily something we should take to work with us, for example. We should be able to put our feelings aside and do X, Y, and Z. If I may speak of it in a sort of sociological sense, we feminized emotion and said, oh, that's what women feel, and acted as though men somehow don't have emotion. Of course, that wasn't the way of our Prophet. He was a man of emotion, and he was strong enough to be vulnerable with his emotions and show his emotions. Think about when Hamza died, radiallahu anhu. Think about the Prophet's emotions when Khadija died, radiallahu anha. There are many examples of this. So we see with Musa that her emotions are important. Her heart has become empty. Why? What is she misses her child. She's worried. and she doesn't have the whole picture. And yet, she's committed to God's way. Now, of course, she's going to be comforted soon in this story of her and her alone. I'm not adding in the other pictures of this because I really want to look at the women around Musa as opposed to the story of Musa today. I want to stay focused. So for her, she eventually is, imagine this, is brought in to become the wet nurse of this baby that, as you all know, has been brought into the house of Pharaoh. And so look at that circle, that story circle, that life circle. What happens when you trust? What happens when we trust? If we can trust Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and we can be devoted and we can stay within the hudud, the limits of God, and we can be of those who are people of prayer and open hearts, and we can really have tawakkul and trust, then we should know everything's going to be fine. Everything's going to be fine. Truly fine. They were dealing, I say they because it was many at the same time, but they were dealing with the tyrant of the age. Of the ages, really. Pharaoh was just, he's shown to us in the Qur'an as a person of such great arrogance that he told the people around him, Ana rabbukum al-a'la, I am your Lord the Most High. He was of the worst. And yet, Musa wasn't afraid of him. She didn't want what he was doing to happen to her son, but she wasn't afraid of him first. No, she didn't want what he was doing to happen to her son, and she was trusting in God. You see the difference? So in trusting in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, she is able to do the impossible. Nurse her baby, put the baby in the river, give it to God. Have her emotions. I really like that we see her emotions. To me, that's really important. You can trust in Allah and still have emotions about it. You don't want to sit with those emotions and turn them into bitterness. But she was worried. I missed him. These are grief and missing. These are signs that we love. These are good things. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brought her back to him as his wet nurse. So she teaches us. She teaches us through this. Let's talk about Asya. Asya is the woman who is the wife of Pharaoh. I always like to point her out when I'm thinking about women who are struggling with difficult marriages. And I know men struggle with difficult marriages too, so don't mishear me, but we're talking here about Asya. I've had many women come to me before. Actually, now that I think about it, I've even had a couple of men come to me before to tell me my spouse is impossible. He doesn't let me A, B, C. I can't pray because of him. I can't wear hijab because of him. I can't really be a believer because of him. And I always come forth with our sister, our great ancestor, Asya. It's a very appropriate name. Asya means Asia in Arabic. She was so incredible that she encompasses a whole continent. She was a woman who was a believer. Make no mistake about this. She was a believer. And in her belief, she was standing every day against the religion of her husband. And at the very time that her husband is literally slaughtering the baby boys because of a dream that he had of Bani Israel, she goes down to the river, picks up a baby, and brings that baby to the very house of the one who is slaughtering these babies. And she is able to convince him to keep the baby. What is that? قُرَّةُ عَيْنٍ لِي. He will be a delight for my eye, or a spring of my eyes. What is that? To the لا تقتلوه. Don't kill him, she says to Pharaoh. But he listens. He listens. How much personal self-confidence did she have to live that life? I think it's really important for especially women who are listening here today to recognize the personal confidence and courage of the women of the Qur'an. Somehow women today, we've been fed a bag of goods. I like to blame globalism and colonialism, but we've been fed a bag of goods that has made us feel like we're not good Muslims if we are strong. Not everyone, to be sure. I just want us to think about that. Courage and commitment to a path. These are the examples of the women in the Quran, and that's for men. These examples are for men and women alike, to be sure. So Asya, I can't even, facing the very person who's killing these boys, tells her, I want to hold this one in the house. This boy is going to stay in the house with me. I want to adopt him as a son. I want to take him as a son. And they do. Ya Allah, the proof of her confidence and her belief. But it goes further, because when the sister of Moses, first of all, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes it so that Moses doesn't nurse from anyone, and they're getting quite desperate. And then the sister of Moses says, oh, I have someone who he'll take this milk. Of course, it's the mother. So not only does she bring the child into the house, she brings the mother into the household of Pharaoh. I want you to see these as miracles. You could see these as protests, as activism against the tyrant, done with wisdom and strength, purpose and success, by two women who didn't know each other, but they were sisters of faith. Both of them, in their belief in Allah, were carrying out the plan of Allah. And so we have Asya, we have Musa, mother, Asya, a wife. We kind of have Maryam in there, the sister, who follows along to see what's happening. So she's an interesting character in the whole story, because she's the one who's able to say, hey, let's bring. So she's also got bravery going on and creativity. Let's find a way to bring my mother here to nurse the child, also worried that the child hasn't eaten. Creativity, determination, able to stick with the plan, ability to sit, courage. Now, life goes on for Musa, and eventually he's going to leave and go off, and he's about to meet Shuaib, Nabi Shuaib. And before he meets him, he meets the two sisters, the two shepherdess sisters, who are shepherding their sheep. But they're struggling, they're waiting, because the water hole is just filled with others. We don't really know why they're not comfortable. Is it because there are other shepherds, period, that they don't know? Is it because there are shepherds that they know and therefore are hesitant? Is it because they're just waiting for them to leave so they can have the water hole alone? The Quran doesn't explain to us exactly what is the reason for them to stand back. Many of the Mufassirin have conjectured about that and thought, oh, it could be this or it could be that, but we're not really sure. But Moses sees them struggling with this and offers to help. He does help. He waters the sheep, meaning brings them to the water hole for them. And now they want to repay him his good deed. So here we're meeting two more believing women because their father is a prophet. Shuaib is a prophet. We're meeting two, and okay, not because their father is a prophet, because we know perfectly well that we have prophets. Nabi Nuh is one example, whose son, even as Noah is telling him, come into the boat, he's like, no, I'm going to go to the mountaintop. And of course, the water takes him away. So it's not because their father is a prophet that they are believers, but they are two more believing women that are presented to us in the Qur'an in the same story of Moses. Two more believing women out there doing some work, taking care of the family in the way the family needed taking care of, shepherding the sheep. When they get some help, they bring forth the adab of humanity. I want to pay you back. Come with us. When he goes and he meets the father gives him an offer. In the end, he ends up marrying one of the sisters. So now, who did we meet? We met his future wife and his sister-in-law too. And we learn from these women as well that these are women of clarity. They're women of thought. And they're younger, maybe younger, single, not married women. So we've met in these stories, these five women. We've met a woman who has given birth, a woman who is married, a sister in the role of a sister. We met one in the role of a wife, and we met one in the role of an in-law. SubhanAllah. We play many roles in life. Each one of us will play possibly all of those roles, possibly only some of them. In this one single story, we learn that we must be believers in every role. Whether we are an in-law, a daughter-in-law, a sister-in-law, a mother-in-law, or a wife, or a husband, a spouse, a parent, a child, a sibling. These are the roles of relationships that bring forth prophets. In our time, there are no more prophets. So these are the roles of relationships that bring forth the next generation of believers. Not just the next generation, that bring forth this generation of believers. When I was doing my research around Muslim women's religious leadership, I was also looking into what does women's leadership look like in other faiths. And I found some really interesting research that talked about how women have a tendency to carry forth culture. Women carry forth culture in religious environments, religious communities. And what is culture here? The intention of the word culture in the research I read, it was the culture of how we live with one another, how we create beautiful places of living and being, how we create traditions, nostalgia, emotion around our living as believers. And here we have Nabi Musa with all these women around him, helping raise him as a child, help him develop as an adult. Maybe we could even say creating culture. In our communities today, all of our men need all of the women of Musa. And all of our women need to be listened to as the women of Musa were listened to. We need to have a role in our community. We all need to be working together to bring forth beautiful traditions, happy, nostalgic experiences. But most important, experiences of courage, tawakkul, trust, the ability to know what we should do. And let's just rest on that one for a minute. Because if there's one common thread between all of these women, is they knew what they should do. The mother of Moses received literal inspiration, and she followed through. The wife of Pharaoh knew that she should care for this child. How did she know that? We're not told. The sister of Moses knew that she needed to bring a way to bring her mother in to nurse the child. The sisters, daughters of Shuaib, knew that they needed to thank this man who had helped them. Ya Allah. Knowing what to do is what gives us the ability to make real change. But we can't know what to do if we haven't first created hearts that can hear, hearts that can see, hearts that are pure, hearts that are in connection with the Creator. And we're in Ramadan. This is Ramadan, and Ramadan is the month of that connection. Ramadan is the month where we create taqwa. لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. It's the month that we create taqwa. And it is an increase of taqwa that we grow in light, in the ability to see. And it is in having light within that we can become like the women around Musa. Be women of courage who know what to do and are able to do it. Sometimes we know what we think we should do, but we just don't have the courage to do it. Sometimes we know what the community needs, but we just don't have the courage to speak it. Sometimes we know exactly what we need, but we just don't have the courage to do it. So let us stand forth today and, like the mother of Moses, step forth and do what needs to be done, even if it's scary and even if we don't see the whole picture. Full tawakkul. Let's be like Asya. No matter what we're facing around us, stay focused on our goal of the worship of one God. Let's be like Maryam and capable of recognizing a problem and finding a solution. And let's be like the two sisters, women of great adab and goodness, those who can see good deeds, recognize them and appreciate them. And women of hard work too, who are willing to do the work and be the solution, be part of us all living in the shelter of one another and growing in taqwa and shukr in this month of Qur'an, Shahr al-Qur'an, in this month of Siyam, of fasting, in this month of Taraweeh and prayers. Ya Allah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you all and help you all and help all of us, and myself included, understand more about the women mentioned in the Qur'an, and for today about the women around Moses. And let us really meditate on their example and come out of this Ramadan with more courage, more clarity, more adab, more belief, and more just commitment to this path. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Kul aam wa antum bi alf khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.